Hello to everyone, Mr. Chairman, members of the Congress, dear participants of this hearing. I want to talk from the people who are still living on occupation. And this is the most dramatic period for them because these people, these Ukrainian citizens, do not have any voices. That's why we have to talk about their stories. The longer the occupation continues, the more tortures, degrading treatment and pain Ukrainian citizens will suffer. The action of the occupants aim at a systematic and intentional destruction of the Ukrainian identity in the occupied territories. This coaches through torture, intimidation, and humiliation. It only takes them a short time to cut off the local citizens from Ukrainian news. They are left in an information vacuum now, without access to internet, mobile phone communication, or the opportunity to leave the seek refuge in Ukrainian government-controlled territories. The occupants have undertaken mass-scale filtration measures. They aim through the repeated interrogation of the local populations at revealing the destroying any potential resistance to the occupying regime. You have to know that 1.3 million of Ukrainians already had experience with filtration. 224,000 of Ukrainian people, Ukrainian children are relocated from occupied territories to Russia. And unfortunately, this process is ongoing till that time when Russia will not stop, but not because of their political will, but because of our common fights with support of free Western world. You might recall the first days after the full-scale invasion when citizens of Ukraine bravely took into the streets and met the armed Russian military with Ukrainian flags, openly demonstrated opposition of Kremlin's unprovoked intervention. In response to the courage of Ukraine, the Russian occupants met the peaceful protests with arms and shooting in places like Chaplinka, Bilozerka, Kakhovka, Kherson, and Energodar, etc. This was followed by large-scale acts of terror, filtration, deportation, forced disappearance, and torture of citizens. Curbing resistance and the free will of citizens was the first step in the Russian plans for the annexation of the new occupied territories. We have to talk about that annexation will be the next stage. The next step in the plan is Russia is to organize fake referendum. And it will happen in September if we will not do something to higher price for Putin and Russia about that. So the Russian Federation must therefore by definition be recognized as a state sponsor of terrorism. A resident of Kherson, Denis Fedko, told in March how the Russian killed members of his family, including 2 minor children, with 36 shots near the Kakhovka hydropower plant. His parents, his brother's wife, and her kids, the 6-year-old Sofia and the 18-month-old Ivan, were driving in the family car. He was on the phone with his mother during the entire time and became witness to their execution. He heard the shots, the children crying, and Irina, his sister-in-law, and his mother screaming. Little Ivan was the last to be finished off. Victoria from Kherson testified that in order to leave the city by car, she had to pass 53 Russian checkpoints. Together with her husband and their child. At 20 checkpoints, the Russians freaked them, took away valuables, ordered them to undress, pat down their underwear. Today, even such difficult escape is not longer as an option. The population in temporary occupied territories is commonly being subject to torture with electric current, beaten up, raped, and morally abused. Such act violates fundamental rights and the laws of war. They are war crimes and crimes against humanity. The goal is to destroy Ukrainians and their identity. That is why these actions constitute genocide in the 21st century. Yulia Pustovit, a resident of Rubizhne in Luhansk Oblast, provided her testimony to civil network OPORA after being evacuated, so-called evacuated, to Russian Federation. She told us that all deportees were deprived of their identification documents by the Russians, and then they would have no freedom of movement, even in Russia. Yulia, however, managed to keep her identification documents. She had to simulate loyalty to the Russian Federation authorities and told that she had relatives in St. Petersburg who were ready to host her. After undergoing filtration and deportation to Russia, she managed to flee from the train with her children. They are now all safe in Estonia. Volunteers help her to be in a safe place. But the investigative committee of Russia is preparing to frame the Ukrainian military for destroying the city of Mariupol, despite we know the Russian army had been destroying the city for months on a daily basis. We saw these evidences in online streaming from Mariupol. Russia needs such accusation for propagandic purpose to create an informational curtain and to cancel the war crimes committed by the Russian armed forces that led to be destructed of the cities. We can expect that the first death sentences issued to members of the Ukrainian military will be turned into systemic effort. Such accusations will become a further instrument of terror directed against Ukrainian citizens, civilians, and Ukrainian soldiers. The intentional shifting of focus away from Russian military by placing the responsibility for any atrocities on illegal armed groups is another method of Russian propaganda. And one more thing, because we have to build bridges in between territories under Ukrainian government control and occupied territories. And you have to know that even now, I have to talk that meta providers, Facebook, Instagram, messengers, which had changed its policy regarding to content intended for the temporary occupied territory. So from 26th of February, Facebook changed their policies and we don't have access because of their policies to occupied territories. This is very important to know how we can help to bridge this to build these bridges with occupied territories, because we want to continue help people on that, and we have to prevent other occupation on Ukraine, and remember that referendum is one of the tools to use nuclear weapon in the future, because you know that Russia will use this stage for this type of aggression.